All right, we're live here. Welcome to the first episode of Industry Insight at the Knickerbocker. We're taking advantage of this staying home time to expand some of the things we do. And one of the things I'm really excited about is this program in which each week we're going to have a different guest from the music industry, a professional, and learn a little bit about what they do and maybe some advice for new artists and emerging artists and people who have just been in the industry a long time and want a different perspective. So I'm really excited about our first guest, Erin Anderson from Olivia Management, which has been in business for 8 years and has grown to have 7 full-time clients. And in addition to that, Erin has a consultation business where she helps artists who may not be ready for a full-time manager, but still need guidance and insight. She's worked in many capacities in the music industry and teaches at Belmont University music business course. So without further ado, let's bring Erin on and start talking to her.
Hi.
Hi, Erin.
Hi. Thanks for having me. I didn't realize this was the first one. I feel
This is the
very
first one.
honored. Thank
Yeah,
you for asking me. This is great.
absolutely. So how are you holding up with all this?
You know, I'm mostly great. I think the first week when we had to cancel something like 90 shows between all of my artists, that was stressful.
Yeah.
And to have that moment where it's like all this income we were planning on, my artists were planning on living off of, I was planning on running my company off of over the next month, just kind of evaporated. But I think that the beautiful thing that's come from it. So I haven't, you kind of mentioned this, like I teach at Belmont. I have a real entrepreneurial background. I majored in entrepreneurship. I went to grad school at Vanderbilt and did a concentration in entrepreneurship. And obviously I run my own company. So like the beauty of what's happening right now it's been really fun to say, okay, we have this blank slate and all the ways that used to work or all the ways that we're used to working aren't options right now. We cannot tour. We cannot do in-person interviews. We can't go appear live on the morning show. We can't even go to radio right now, like Lightning 100 broadcasting from their houses. So it's kind of like this interesting, unique entrepreneurial challenge where we have this blank slate and it's like, okay, what's our actual job and how do we, in this weird time, get some money coming in the doors and get creative about it? And so I think some of my artists that are a little technologically averse or not great at it,
Right.
they've been kind of forced to embrace online streaming shows. And then when they actually get paid for them, they realize, oh, there's something here,
Sure.
or I have an artist that's doing a campaign where it's like, I'm sorry, I'm not, able to meet you at the merch table, but let's do this. If you order my new record online, I'll call you on the phone and say thank you.
Oh, that's awesome.
So we're just getting really creative. And I think the beauty of all of this is going to be when the world hopefully goes back to normal soon.
Right.
I hope all those new ideas and new revenue streams stick as well. So my hope, my dream is that at the end of all this, we're in a better position because artists have figured out different and unique ways to connect with and engage with fans and provide value. And they can add back the old ones that we're working as well. So in general, I'm pretty hopeful most days.
Yeah, I mean, you have to be, but it really has been interesting to see how many artists have just quickly adapted to this as sort of the new normal. And I guess that's what they do.
It is. And I think like artists are scrappy people. And I think in a great way, independent artists are constantly trying to figure out what's next and how do I keep the lights on. And so I think, their inclination is to be creative about it too. So it's been good.
That's really awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad to hear you're optimistic about it all. That's good.
Yeah, I just miss people. I'm such a person. Like I manage artists because I like connecting people and I like going to live shows, and so that part's been sad.
Well, you just touched on something that is why you manage artists. I'm curious how you got your start in the industry, and
yeah. Let me see if I can make this a somewhat shortened version of the story. So, I mean, I grew up playing the piano and singing in church choir, but I wasn't very good. So I just wanted to be around music. And funny story, I was actually touring Vanderbilt, a senior in high school. And the girl that was leading the tour I was talking to my dad about, do I major in music? Do I major in business? And she said, there's this school down the street called Belmont that has music business. Have you heard of that? Like the girl on the tour at Vanderbilt sent me that.
That's awesome.
I wish I knew her name. I would send her a thank you card. But so I went to Belmont for music business, and that absolutely just like was the right fit for me because I really enjoy business. My dad's an entrepreneur. Like that's just kind of how my brain works, thinking about how to optimize things. And so my first job out of school was I worked at Universal Music Group. I worked for the CFO, general manager at the Nashville segment of the label. And
cool.
it was such a great, I feel like I lucked into that job. I was just so lucky because my boss was this really smart, really good man who had been in the music industry for maybe 20 years when I met him. And he didn't want me to get him coffee. He wanted me to like help him evaluate spreadsheets and really like wrap my head around the industry. And so I got this great education, you know, from a really smart person. And after I'd been there for a few years, you know, he had an MBA from Vanderbilt. And, you know, while in general in music, people don't necessarily care if you're educated, I just had this feeling like, you know, the industry is in a really weird flux right now. And Spotify hadn't launched yet. And so we weren't really making money from streaming yet. And so I decided to go back to school and I went to Vanderbilt to get my MBA. And I got an MBA with a concentration in entrepreneurship. And then I think I had like a minor in strategy and marketing. What's funny is I kind of thought that would be like, I would go for 2 years and I would just invent something cool. And that would be like my business. And I would leave school and I would go run this music business that was going to fix the industry. Like I wanted to invent Spotify or something. I don't know. But, one of the things I learned in that time was that I do have an entrepreneurial brain, but I'm not particularly like innovative in terms of coming up with super creative ideas or super, unique things. And so I think in my heart, I really wanted to like change the industry, but that's not my skill set. My skill set is if something cool exists, I know how to come in and make money from it or grow it or, you know, do whatever. But so I didn't come up with a cool idea. I graduated from Vanderbilt and I got recruited to go work at Amazon Music in Seattle. And I really wanted to stay in Nashville, but you know, if you get offered decent money, cool city to work at a really cool company that was doing cool things, it kind of felt like, okay, I need to go try this. Sure. So I moved to Seattle and I worked at Amazon Music for a couple years. And I essentially, I did a couple things, but I mostly did artist relations kind of stuff. So I was trying to help Amazon because the music team was probably only 4 years old when I got there. It had MP3 store hadn't launched, maybe only 3, hadn't launched it was a newer team. It was a very small team. I want to say there were like 20, 25 of them when I got there. And now there's like a couple hundred. It's gotten really big, obviously. But so I got to kind of like be the face and voice of Amazon to some artists in the industry and invite them in to campus. And we shot some interviews and performances. And I got this really great, that's kind of when I started to have exposure to a lot of managers because I would be dealing with the managers to invite their artists to come be a part of something at Amazon Music. And at the same time, I was also learning that, you know, my dad's an entrepreneur. I double majored in music business and entrepreneurship in undergrad. I had a concentration in entrepreneurship in grad school. And what I really wanted was to run a company. And here I was working at one of the largest music retailers in the world, largest retailers in the world. And I had like 9 levels of bosses. So I would have a cool idea and my boss would like it and his boss would like it and her boss would like it. And then somewhere 9 levels up the chain, someone I had never met would be like, no, we're not going to do that thing. No. Put all of your energy into. And so I think I realized like, this is not a place that long-term I'm going to thrive.
Right.
And so about the time I'm having that realization, some friends of mine from Nashville were on tour in Seattle and they were sleeping on my floor. And I went to the show and it was so fun and there was so much energy. And it's just really funny because this is exactly how it happened. The lead singer and I were having a beer after the show and we hadn't really caught up yet. Like I showed up at the show, we waved, they played, and then we were sitting there having a beer. And I hadn't gotten a chance to say yet, like, I'm kind of, you know, unhappy here. This is not the right place for me. But unprompted, he said to me, I really wish you hated your job, wanted to manage bands, missed Nashville, and wanted to move back and manage us.
Whoa.
And he was kidding. I mean, he was kidding. Like,
right.
Of course you don't want to do that. You have a well-paid job at a cool company in music in a cool city. And I just like in that moment, it hit me like, oh yeah, that's exactly what I want to do. And
yeah, that's great.
I think I had been waiting for this like brilliant idea to hit me over the head. Like I was waiting to invent Spotify and not realizing that you can absolutely be an entrepreneur and not invent something new. Just do a business that already exists. Just differentiate yourself in some way. Right. And here I was with like label experience and music retail experience and an MBA and like years of interning and event planning. And I could help independent bands grow. And that's a business. And like, I don't know why it took until that moment for that to kind of cross my mind. And I think it was just right time, right place. You know, what do they say? Like luck is preparation meets opportunity or something. So it kind of felt
something like that.
This very like kismet conversation. And they left Seattle the next day. And I was like, I'm your manager now.
That's awesome. So you did manage them.
I did. Yeah. And I quit my job. I mean, the folklore that I've grown the story to in my head, you know, 9 years later is that I marched in the next morning and quit. I don't actually remember if it was the next morning but within a month I was back in Nashville managing that band.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So that kind of brings me to my next question, which would be, what is the role of a manager?
I love that. And I saw you put that in your questions you were going to ask me. And I feel like if you ask 10 managers, the answer is going to be different.
Sure.
I think also if you ask 10 artists, I think their answer is going to be different. And that's one of the challenges of my job is defining what is my role, drawing boundaries around like, if I focus on these things, I'm good at my job. If you want me to focus on these things, that's not even beneficial to you.
Gotcha.
So it's taken me a long time to define that. And I think if you ask artists, they're going to say that a great manager, you know, makes a lot of connections for them and opens a lot of doors for them, which I think is true and important. Mm-hmm. However, I would argue that a really great manager is someone who can get in the trenches with you, be entrepreneurial alongside you, and help you like have the life you want to have, and help you create revenue streams and help you manage it, you know, manage the day-to-day, which I have a day-to-day person that works for me. But also I just hear too many artists that have some big, important, powerful manager that can make all these connections for them, but they don't get called back very often. You know, like they talk to their manager once every 2 or 3 weeks on the phone, and they don't feel like a priority, and they might not be a priority. So for me, I feel like I'm doing my job well when I am every day working for each of my artists to help get them closer to the life that they want to have. And letting them define that too. I think some managers are like, this is the one path to success and you're only successful if you do this. And, you know, I manage artists that have children and they want to be home and see them. And they want to, how do I make a living, but spend 10 months out of the year at home? So I think I'm good at my job when I am helping to create opportunity, exploit any opportunity that's out there, you know, for the maximum income, and work with the artist to try to make their life look like what they want it to look like.
Gotcha.
And then I think sometimes, especially as an independent manager, that means I take on things that probably aren't my job. And that's probably my biggest struggle as a manager is, you know, I had an artist once ask me if I'd help him with his taxes. And I was like, okay, this is where I drop the line. Like,
wow.
I'm EPA. I can afford seats for the things we bought. But I think in a great way, if I do a good job, artists just really trust me. And so they're like, well, what about this? Well, can you help with this? Well, can I give you this? Can you be in charge of this? And I try to take that as a compliment and then try to politely close the door and say, no, that
right.
Part's my job.
Sure. And have those boundaries.
Yeah.
And so with that said, and all the various aspects that you sort of see over as a manager, at what point for an artist do they need a manager? Because all of those things could apply to really any artist at any level. You could always need that help.
Right. The way I describe it is, if you've done such a great job of putting music out, growing your career, growing your fan base, growing your awareness, that there are so many requests coming in for your time and attention that you are missing things. That's the point at which you need a manager.
Gotcha.
So, and that doesn't necessarily mean financially you're in a place that a manager will jump at it, but it means that, you know, I have so many artists contact me that are like, I made this record, I need a manager. And it's like, there's nothing to manage yet.
Sure.
So as an artist, you have to drum up so much of it on your own and do your best to grow a fan base and plant those seeds and, get people excited about it. And if you can do that and show a manager that, they're going to be more excited about it too. But what I'm really looking for when I'm talking to artists is, you know, I'm a boutique manager. So there's like a income threshold that if an artist isn't making this much money yet, I just can't afford to do it because there's no one artist, you know, pulling in a couple $1 million a year that I work for that can float me to work for other artists for free. But really what I'm looking for is like when we sit down and we meet and I get to know the artist and we're talking about what they have going on and what they're interested in, are my wheels turning and am I thinking about the first 150 things I could do for them and that I could do that they couldn't do for themselves. That's the other thing is sometimes I meet with artists and I'm like, there's a lot here to do, but you don't need to pay me to do it. You could do it.
Right.
And you could do it probably faster and better than I could because you know your fan base, you know your voice, you know your brand. So I think my rule of thumb is when you've built it to the point that you feel like by not having a manager, you are missing opportunities that are coming your way because you just can't physically get back to all of them. That's when there's something there to manage. That's kind of the tipping point in my mind.
Gotcha. And when that happens at that point, do you find it's typical that artists are coming to managers and presenting that, or is it the other way around where a manager is seeking out those artists?
Yeah, probably a little bit of both. I have to be honest, I don't think I've ever signed an artist from a cold email. I've signed an artist where they emailed me and said, you know, our mutual friend Steve said to reach out. So there was some existing connection.
Sure.
So I think that if you do a good enough job growing the buzz, then you like I don't want to say they will come to you because I don't really quite believe in the if you build it, they will come. But if you build it and there's buzz around you and you put some feelers out there, you put it out to the universe, like any relationships you do have in music currently. Most of my artists have come from me calling an agent or a label or a lawyer I'm friends with and saying, you know, I've got this space on my roster and I'm really looking for someone. If you have any clients that are looking for a manager, send them my way. So all of us in the industry, you know, no one wants to be the only business person on someone's team. We like working with agents we love and labels we love and lawyers we love. So that's where I start when I'm looking for a client. I go to that circle of industry folks that I really trust.
Gotcha.
And I check in with them on, you know, who do they have coming across their desk. So I think, you know, creating relationships in the industry will benefit you so that when you are at that point that you've got a lot going on, you can kind of put the word out there, we're looking for a manager. And then I would hope that some would come your way if you've really built that buzz.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, so I first met you several years ago when my band Wild Sun was kind of at a point where we were doing a lot on our own, but we were just kind of wondering what our next steps were. And I came across you because you were offering a consultation service to artists who were at that point where they didn't need a full-time manager, but they needed some guidance and help, which I still think is an awesome service and really cool. What kind of led you to start that service?
A couple things. So the band that I started my company alongside them, their second record they made was like a super pop record. And in that time, I realized that my contacts personally were much more in like folk Americana indie rock. And so we parted ways, maybe like after 3.5, 4 years. They were still good friends, but it just kind of was like, I don't make sense for you anymore.
Gotcha.
And so I had this like bandwidth where I had this time. And I was like, do I go sign another client? Like, what do I do with this time? And I had this kind of nagging feeling that, you know, when you have some clients that start to do some cool stuff, artists are watching. And so I get I don't know. At the time, I probably got 2 or 3 emails a week from people looking for managers. Now it's like 10 or more. I get, every week of artists looking for managers, and they're not all good. But every once in a while I'd come across something that was great, and I would just feel bummed. Like, I wish I could help you. I wish that I had the time and the bandwidth and the energy to be on your team, but I just don't, because it's important to me to, not under deliver to any of my clients. So I don't ever want to spread myself too thin. So what would happen with those artists is I would just really like them. So I'd go follow them on social media, and, I'd go buy their records or stream them or whatever. And then I would watch as they put projects out or promoted tours, and I would just cringe, like, oh, don't do it that way. Oh, if you did this, it would be so much better. And
yeah.
So that's kind of like that in the back of my head of, what if I took this time I had been devoting, 15 hours a week I had been devoting to this one artist, and instead I broke it up hourly. And when those artists emailed me looking for a manager, if they were good and I thought I might be able to actually help you, I would write them back and say, I'm really sorry, I don't have the bandwidth to take on a full-time client, but I do have, an hour every other week I could give you, where I could at least point you in the right direction, answer your questions, prevent you from making really, I don't want to say dumb mistakes, because the industry is hard and it's hard to wrap your head around. But at that point, I had been, in the industry for over 10 years. I had been managing for like 4.5, I think, by the time I started doing consulting. So I had helped enough artists put records out. I knew the best practices. I knew this works. This certainly doesn't, so that's kind of what it was born out of. And then honestly, on the back end too, for me, if you know anything about entrepreneurship, recurring revenue is like the best way to grow a company. If you have any amount of guaranteed money every month, you can do a lot more. Even if it's not a huge sum of money, you at least know, okay, I can go rent an office that costs this much, or I can hire an assistant that costs this much, because every month on the first, X people are paying me. And so that was the other motivator. All of my mentors in life were saying, if you could just have some amount of recurring income, whatever it is, $1,000 a month of income you could count on. Because with artists, they take a month off, I make nothing.
Yeah, right.
So that was the other kind of thing for me, was I realized that if I really did carve this time out, and I was very intentional about it, and I was intentional about helping artists and making sure that I was really providing value, so they would tell their friends, and so they would come back when they had another record or another tour, that could help me change my business. And that's the other thing, is when I started doing that was when I was able to hire an assistant, because I felt confident I could actually pay her salary on a consistent basis. And that's when my company really started to grow.
That's awesome.
Had some recurring income. So it's been really, really fun to get to be a part of so many more releases than I would have otherwise, and get to watch, so many artists like your record. I really like it. And it's fun to say, like, I had whatever small part in helping that exist in the world. That feels really good.
That's awesome. Well, yeah. And I can't recommend you enough. So I'm going to put your link up here, and interested artists, don't hesitate to reach out to Erin, because it's just, you have invaluable insight, and a lot of artists don't have access to that.
Thank you.
So I just think that's such a great service you have.
Thank you. It's fun. It's really fun. And it's fun to, like I said, get to be a part of putting good art out into the world, especially right now. Like, I just keep thinking about how lucky am I that, like, the world is a weird, awful place right now, but music is comfort to so many people. And so to get to be a part of that is really, like, I don't take that for granted,
Yeah, no, it really is. And we were saying this earlier, how many musicians and artists have really risen to the occasion. And
that's
it's been good. What else have you seen as sort of the impact of the coronavirus on the industry?
Well, and I was telling you this before we started, but one of the things that I found really beautiful is some of my artists that have just been kind of averse to any sort of online streaming shows, because they have an amazing live show and it's important to them, to have a drummer or have their whatever effects pedal or whatever.
Right.
It's been cool to see, for them to experience, like, okay, I guess we'll try this online show thing, and fans to love it. And fans understand, like, this is not your typical live show. We don't expect the same sound quality. We don't expect the same, like, hard rock show or whatever, but they still like it, and they still buy tickets, or they still donate. And that's still actually a revenue stream. And so one of the things I think is really cool is that I think there's going to be a handful of artists that have discovered new revenue streams during this. But then when the world goes back to normal and they go back to touring, those new revenue streams can stay. They can still do live shows once a month or once a week or, you know, whatever they want to do. They can still find new and exciting ways to engage with fans. And I think that's the other thing I've been talking to my artists about, like, what is your actual job? And I think some artists think that their job is to play live music, and it's not. Your job is to like connect with people and make them feel better.
Right.
So, you know, and you do that typically through releasing recorded music and touring. But if you can keep in mind that that's your actual job, that's what people actually pay you for and spend money, you know, on you, to have that connection and feel a part of something and feel better, then if you just figure out, you know, new and creative ways to translate that. Like I was saying that one of my artists just had a record come out, and instead of meeting people at the merch table, she said, you know, I'm sorry, I can't meet you at the merch table. So how about this? If you order my record online, I'm just going to call you and say thank you. And we get
that's so cool.
we would have had at the merch table on the phone. And man, sales have shot up since she said that. It's been really fun. And she's really loved having the conversations with people, you know, and so that connection is what our job is. And so that's been really fun to help artists kind of dig in and discover that and think about that.
Yeah, that's such a cool idea. I mean, the ability to talk to one of your favorite artists on the phone. That's just such a cool idea.
It's been fun. It's been really fun.
Well, we're going to start to wrap this up, and it's been really great to have you. I'm just so grateful that you were a part of this.
Thank you.
So I have your link here on the ticker, and it'll go beneath in the post. For any artists interested in learning more, don't hesitate to reach out to Erin. It's just, it can't hurt.
I would love it. And all my tours got canceled. So I'm doing more than 15 hours of consulting right now because there's not that much else going on. So I got the time. I would love to, talk to anyone about how to help them and, you know, navigate the world. One of the things I like to say about consulting is, you know, there's all kinds of online classes you can take, and, you know, what's the music business book that's so famous?
The Don Passman
one? The Passman book. That's online.
It's like everything you need to know about the music industry.
Like,
on like the 25th edition.
Yeah, totally. That book is great as a foundation. But what I like about consulting is that I get to be iterative with artists. Like, path A doesn't always work for everybody. So we're going to come up with a strategy and go down path A. And if that doesn't work and people don't respond to it, or you don't see the results you like, okay, cool, then come back and let's iterate on that and see what worked and what didn't. And then let's come up with plan B and C and D and E and F, you know, because if you name 10 artists that are successful, they have 10 completely different paths to success. So that's one of the things I really love about the consulting thing too, is that, like, it's not just reading a book or taking a class. There's like, okay, if that advice doesn't work, there's more where that came from, you know, and we can try other things too.
And it's tailored to the artist, which is really something you don't get from, like you said, books or articles.
I try. And that's the other thing is, like, you know, if someone's watching this and they email me and I end up saying I'm not the right fit, it's just because I don't want to take anybody's money or give them advice about something I don't know about, you know? So I definitely personally kind of stick in this, like, folk, Americana, indie rock. That's kind of my world. If it's too rap or metal, I just don't have the right knowledge to be great, you know, in space. So I'm pretty good at self-selecting, like, okay, this is someone I think I can actually help as well.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And on that note, so say, you know, someone is looking for advice in that field. What do you recommend to artists looking for more help? And
that's a great question. I should, like, do some research and try to connect with other people who do what I'm doing. I'm sure there are some in other genres. And also, I also don't want to say, like, I can't help those people. There are definitely, like, some best practices that span genre lines, like how to submit your music for playlist consideration and how to, you know, distribute music and the ins and outs of online marketing or whatever. That's kind of similar. It's more just like the paths for attention. I don't actually know what I would say. I would do research. What I would do is I would look for managers who have successful clients in that industry and email them, because who knows, I do know a handful of other managers that do something similar to what I do. They might not be quite as vocal about it. Like, they don't advertise that they do consulting, but if you emailed a manager of an artist who's successful in the genre you operate in, you know, they could probably point you in the right direction, or who knows, they might consider offering consulting as well.
Gotcha. Very cool. Yeah, I just I think it's such a mystery to a lot of artists. And there's definitely wrong illusions. A lot of artists think that a manager waves a magic wand and they've somehow made it overnight.
Nope, managers don't do that. Agents don't do that. Labels don't do that. It's a lot. It's, you know, it's a combination of right team, right energy, right song, right budget, right time, right place. You know, it's catching lightning in a bottle. And we, you know, we do it every once in a while, and that's just like enough to keep us going, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the time you're helping artists have a career. And that's another illusion I think a lot of artists have, that either they make it or there's nothing. But in between that, there's a whole, you know, you can have a real career.
Totally. And that's the beauty of, I think, the internet and streaming and, you know, Spotify and TuneCore and CD Baby. Like, there's a middle class musician now, and there wasn't even 10, 15 years ago. So you can absolutely make a living as a musician putting music out yourself. You can never have a label put a bunch of money behind you, or never have a huge agent, and you can still make a great living. You just have to get creative.
Right. And that's what you help.
Yeah, I try to.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much. This has been a real pleasure.
Of course, I really enjoyed it. It was good to see you, and I hope some folks reach out. I would love to help people.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't hesitate to email Erin, and the link is posted, Olivia Management. And yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely. All right. Take care, Erin.
Good to see you. Bye.
Bye-bye.